It's removed the springiness, it's removed the softness or a little bit of the vagueness through the gates that you had in the stock shifter, if you can even call it that. The stock shifter is absolutely brilliant, but it has tightened up the feel through every single component of your gate shifting. Apologies, my camera's bouncing around all over the place as I'm trying to do this review in such a way that you can experience the shifting whilst I'm driving the car, so apologies. But look, firstly, let's talk about the shift, the short shift action. Firstly, yeah, it's much shorter in the vertical throws from the odd gears to the even gears. It's perfect, I would say. Would you want it any shorter? Not really. Would you want it any longer? I mean, the shorter the shifter, the better, generally speaking, right? But there is such a thing as too short a shift. This action is just perfect. A couple of interesting aspects about it, I would say, is it feels like there's a slightly shorter action from your forward gears or your odd gears to your even gears. And what I mean by that is when you're shifting from an even gear to an odd gear, you obviously move through the neutral aspect of the gearing, and then you move into the engaged odd gears. And there's an actual, it feels like it's a slightly shorter movement from the even gear to neutral to the odd gear. Of course, it's one smooth movement, but just the length of the movement between those neutral feels a little bit longer and shorter. Now, what's great about that is that when you are shifting up, when you're rowing through the gears and you're on it and you want a quick shift, that's exactly the way you want it to feel. You're going from a slightly longer throw to a shorter throw, let's just say, in terms of that slight subtle movement. And when you want to shift up and row through the gears quickly, that's exactly what you want. Now, whether that is a function of the Numeric or if that's actually a function of the Porsche gearbox and the way it's configured, I don't know, but that is certainly more noticeable within the Numeric. It gives you, and what that fundamentally means, what that fundamentally gives you is this feels like I can literally shift through the gears in a shorter amount of time. I can shift faster than I could in the stock shifter. Now, I'm talking about probably milliseconds here. It's not a massive difference, but it's a noticeable difference, and it's a difference where it matters. It's in feel, it's a difference in experience, it's a difference exactly where and how you want it. So that vertical shift between moving up and down the gears, shorter, sharper, crisper, more feeling, absolute better experience, pretty close really in terms of the shifting length and feel to the GT4, which is my benchmark. So that aspect is brilliant. It's perfect. It's nailed it. Can't say enough about that dimension of the shifting. And then the horizontal shift, so as you move across the gates left to right, let's say, yeah, again, noticeably shorter, noticeably sharper, but at the same time an increase in accuracy. You'd never feel like, or at least I never feel like, I'm going to be shifting into a wrong gear, let's say. If anything, it feels more accurate. Because of the notchiness and the feeling of engagement, you know exactly where you are as you are diving between those leftmost to the middle to the right H pattern, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth gearing ratios. It's perfect. It's bang on. It feels very akin to the GT4 again, maybe even slightly shorter in the amount of distance in that horizontal movement of the gear stick, but it's phenomenal. It's perfect. It's exactly where you want it to be. Now, continuing that theme further around the horizontal movement, going into reverse. In the GT4, moving into reverse and shifting through that gate, that lockout, it's pretty hard, is probably the summary and the short version of that. The first time you get in a GT4 or a GT car and you go to move through that lockout into reverse, you'll be surprised how much weight you have to put behind it. And for somebody who's not used to driving a GT car the first time they drive it, etc., they really struggle, or they might even think there's something wrong. It's quite difficult to move into that reverse gate. Now, with the upgraded shifter here, I would say it's definitely a harder shift through the gate than the stock, but not as hard as the GT4. It's just right. Again, is probably how I would summarize it. The stock shifter, absolutely nothing wrong with it. With the stock shifters, you're not really going to accidentally shift into reverse. Let's say there's plenty of weight required to move into that reverse gear, but with this upgraded shifter, even more weighting. And the great part about that is just when you're moving from second to first, you don't think about it at all. Am I accidentally going to shift into reverse? I mean, it's not a thing on the stock shifter either, but it just means you can just really give it that row from second to first. You've got, exactly where you are, exactly what gear you're going into, where reverse is, you can't even really feel the lockout. You can't feel any potential for the shifters moving into that place. It just feels like you're driving a H pattern second to first, until you actually are obviously parked up in neutral and you want to go into reverse, at which case it's again, you've got that perfect amount of feedback through the lockout into reverse. So again, that's an upgraded aspect of this shifter that I think is brilliant, bang on the money. Again, absolutely nailed it. And then the biggest thing, probably one of the biggest things for me, on top of just the increased short shift and the increased feeling and all of that great aspects that you would expect from the upgrade, is for the 7-speed gearbox. When you are up in 6th gear in the stock shifter, this is probably my one, or my most, if I was to nitpick, my one negative thing or most negative thing about the stock shifter is when you are going from 6th to 5th, you could, if you're not concentrating, you're thinking about merging, you're looking over your shoulder, and you're thinking about quickly grabbing 5th gear to get around the idiot in front of you that's doing 20 k's under the speed limit or driving just too damn slow. You could occasionally, if you're not thinking about it, you're not used to it, you could grab 7th. You're moving from 6th into 5th, and the gate might swing open just a little bit more. You might move through that, and instead of end up in 5th, because you're doing that action, you end up over in 7th. Now, again, with the Numeric upgrade, I went for the 2mm spring, which gives you a bit more of a harder throw horizontally. So that's one thing I'll mention. This isn't the 1.2mm spring, this is the 2mm. But again, the upgrade has negated that slightly negative aspect of potentially shifting from 6th to 5th and ending up in 7th. With this slightly more meatier, weightier lockout into 7th, that shift from 6th to 5th, it just feels like you're driving a 6-speed gearbox. You really feel like you're not thinking about it, and no chance of going into 7th, unless of course you want to shift into 7th and you're cruising along in 6th and you want to make that engagement. Then it's easy. You can move through the gate exactly how you would want to shift through the gate, and you're in 7th gear. So the other big upgrade for this, which was really one of the driving factors behind wanting to try the Numeric upgrade, was to just make it feel like a 6-speed with a 7th speed gear that's there if I really want it. This has nailed that brief as well. And interestingly, that is one of the biggest negative feedbacks I hear when you look at the reviews comparing the 7-speed to the 6-speed. So the 991.1 had the 7-speed, they went to a 6-speed in the 991.2. A lot of that feedback was because people felt like that 7th gear was a little bit in the way when you're shifting from 6th to 5th. Now with the Numeric, not an issue. And for me, I daily drive my 911. Unless I'm driving a GT4, then I drive that car very regularly as well. So I'm constantly moving between the phenomenal race car gearbox in the GT4, and then I was moving into the slightly softer, slightly springier, slightly less engaging stock 7-speed in the 911, and I was constantly missing that experience of the shifter within the GT4. Now these things are on par. And I would almost, I'd go as far as to argue that this shifter actually feels better than the GT4, particularly for daily usage. It's slightly shorter, so I literally feel like I can row through this faster. It's slightly less weightier than the GT4, and the GT4 is great, but it does have a pretty big piece of heft and weight behind it as you're shifting through, which is a phenomenal feel. When you're on a racetrack, that's exactly how you want that gearbox to be communicating to you. But when you're on the street and you're driving, and I do drive my GT4 on the road in traffic pretty regularly, it is slightly above a comfortable level of weight, let's say. It's a beautiful feeling. Every shift is an experience, but this just dials that down by maybe 10-20%, and it is just perfect. It is just phenomenal weighting, phenomenal feeling of engagement, the communication of which gear you're in, where you are within the H pattern, the movement throughout each of those. I couldn't imagine it being any better for a driver. If you're a driver, if you enjoy manuals, if you enjoy the experience of rowing through a couple of gears, if I hadn't ever driven the GT4, I would say the stock 911 6 and 7 speed shift is perfect, but the upgrade to, again, the Numeric, it is absolute perfection. It is phenomenal. I'm not sponsored by Numeric. I paid full price for this. I have not communicated with Numeric. I bought this through a third party, installed it myself, and as you can see, I'm in a right-hand drive vehicle, etc. as well. I love a manual gearbox. I've got a manual R34 GTR, which is another brilliant gearbox, the jet drag in that, but this is now the best gearbox I've ever driven. Look, the GT4 is also phenomenal. Is one better than the other? Difficult to say. I'd probably say no, not really. They're just different. The GT4 is a little bit weightier, which, unless you're really cranking through the gears, and you tend to only really be cranking through the gears when you're really on the car and you're in revs and you're on a track and the adrenaline's really flowing, that gearbox, phenomenal. But for when you're on the streets and you're cruising, or you're having a bit of a fun time in the 911 on the street, you want a slightly dialed down experience to that level of weight, but you still want all of that engagement. This is that perfect balance and that perfect blend. It's just beautiful to use, and it's a massive upgrade. And if I was to sell this car for whatever reason and buy another manual 991.1 7-speed, or even a 991.2 6-speed, I would, without question, put the Numeric shifter back within that car. This is one of the best upgrades I've ever done to any vehicle. I modify all my cars, particularly the likes of the R34 GTR, etc. I'm a big JDM, and I've built some pretty powerful BMWs and my Porsches. None of my Porsches are really all that stock either. This is worth the upgrade if you enjoy a direct feeling manual gearbox, if you enjoy having a little bit of heft in the gearbox, etc. Which, let's face it, if you're a 911 driver and you've bought a manual gearbox, you're in that category. You can't go wrong with this. It lives up to my expectations. It's exceeded my expectations. It makes me even more excited to drive a car. I already look for every excuse I can to get in the car and drive it. This has just made that situation even more of a commitment, or an ask, if you like. And yeah, I'm really blown away with the combination of the stock Porsche manual gearbox, which is already one of the best gearboxes in the market, in conjunction with the upgrade from this shifting mechanism. It is just worth the time, effort, the money that it costs, however you want to think about it. I installed it myself. There's an installation video as well on my channel if you want to see that, but this is a first drive impression feedback video for you. Everybody wants to hear this. Of course, I couldn't find any real great content on the 992 talking about the numeric and particularly those aspects of that horizontal shifting up and down through as you row through the gears and the vertical shifting, etc. So I wanted to give a little bit of perspective on that and just sing its praises. What else can I tell you about it? Like I say, this is the 2mm spring. I don't know what the 1.2mm spring feels like. It's slightly softer. It has a slightly, this returns to center with a fairly strong amount of force and feedback. Again, I'd say the GT4 probably even more so, although they're very comparable. The 1.2 is a bit softer in that sort of motion, so it's going to feel a little bit more like the stock, and just more of a lesser percentile upgrade, if you like. Also, in terms of the height of the gear shift, you can adjust the height of the gear shift with the and the height of the knob, and thus the height of the throw with the numeric. The 992, and I've been referring to this as a 991.1. I just realised this is a 992.1. Apologies, dyslexia. My 992.1 7-speed already has a short shifter in it from factory, so it appears that when you wind the numeric all the way down to its lowest height, that is pretty much bang on same height as the short shifter from factory from Porsche. And to be honest, you really wouldn't want it any shorter. You do want a bit of leverage. You do want a bit of movement on the gear stick, right? So this is, again, it's just perfection. And it probably addresses one of my final issues, or one of my final fears of this upgrade was Porsche get the experience and the feeling of every input bang on. They make it perfect. What I would say is with the stock 992 Carrera T, it is perfect, but it's perfect for everyday usage. So it's a little bit softer, a little bit less experience or feeling than the GT4. If you'd never driven a GT4 or a GT Porsche manual, it would be phenomenal. You'd think it was perfect. I completely get that and appreciate that. The fact that I also drive a GT manual and I know what that feeling and experience is like, I was looking to bring the stock 911 manual feeling closer to that, and this has answered all of those asks. It's perfect. It's phenomenal. I can't say enough about it, as you've probably experiencing in this part of the video, and that's my thoughts, that's my feelings. I don't think you can get it wrong. I recommend it to anybody who's on the fence about it. Give it a try, and if you would like to see the installation, jump on my channel. Love for you to like, share, subscribe. I don't look to monetize this stuff or whatever. As you can tell, it's a cheap production. I'm just giving you my raw feelings because I love Porsches, I love upgrades, and anything you can do to make it even just slightly incrementally better, which I didn't think was possible, there you go, you can. It's a numeric shifter, it's a great upgrade. So if you're thinking about it, if you're a manual driver, you love your Porsche, can't go wrong, and worst case, you can always return it to stock, which is what made my decision even easier when I went ahead and I did this upgrade. So very happy, love it, recommend it. Like, share, subscribe if you want to support at all, but like I said, I don't make any money off it anyway, so whatever. Just yeah, that's my feedback as a manual driving Porsche loving manual lad, gent, and I hope you also get as much enjoyment out of your Porsches as I do. Thanks for watching.
Oh.